Starting us off, NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson joins me now from Orem, Utah. I'm also joined by NBC News national law enforcement and intelligence correspondent Tom Winter, NBC News Chief Justice and National Affairs correspondent Kelly O'Donnell, and Casey Jordan, a criminologist and investigative profiler who's also a professor of justice and law administration at Western Connecticut State University. Thanks to all of you for being here. Steve, let me start with you. Tell us a little bit more about what authorities told us today regarding the suspect, Tyler Robinson.
Yeah, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, also a college student, lived with his family in Washington, Utah. It's about 4 hours from here or so. Is attending Dixie Technical College under an apprenticeship program. As you mentioned, no prior criminal record. As we understand it, and investigators explain, it was Robinson's father who then contacted or saw the pictures that were posted by the FBI, I should say, with that $100,000 reward. Those pictures so crucial, so pivotal to the FBI's investigation because, again, it was Robinson's father, saw those pictures, identified who it was, that it was his son, got in contact with a family friend, we understand, as a local minister. That family friend then contacted the sheriff's department, leading investigators to an arrest. Another thing that led investigators was Robinson's digital footprint. It was a messaging app called Discord. A lot of gamers use it to sort of communicate where they're going to be gaming next. This was also could be used as a messaging platform, and that's what Robinson was using it for, according to investigators, speaking to pertinent details about the case, including the bolt-action rifle that was found, the location of it, the fact that he knew about it, indicated some pre-planning in that instance. And also, obviously, just the gumshoe work on the ground, recovering the weapon, the imprints that were taken on scene, a handprint, a boot print. We know Robinson obviously will be facing charges in the next coming days, likely as early as Tuesday. Kristen.
And just to be very clear, where is he now, and is he facing state or federal charges or both, Steve?
So state charges at this point. He's in the Utah County Jail, maybe about 13 minutes or so south of our location from the campus here. Of course, federal charges are possible, but that's a different course of investigation, obviously, that officials have to undertake. Kristen.
All right, Steve Patterson starting us off there today. We really appreciate it. Tom, let me turn to you now. Walk us through how authorities were able to identify and apprehend Tyler Robinson. How did they know, as they say, they've got their guy?
Well, it certainly helped in this instance. It appears that a family member, a family friend identified as a minister that knew this family, made the call to a local sheriff's office. And that was after, according to our reporting, multiple law enforcement officials briefed on the matter. This minister received a phone call from the father of the alleged attacker here, Tyler Robinson. And so this is a case that kind of evolved, according to authorities, as a result of the father seeing some images. There was a confrontation about this incident, and then the father reaches out to the minister. The minister then calls the local sheriff's office, and this is where we are. That's how this case really got broken, and I think it underscores the fact that whenever images are out there in the public, you allow family members and friends the opportunity to try to identify somebody and try to arrange for a peaceful arrest for this not to end violently, and that appears, Kristen, to be the case here.
And it's notable, Tom, because authorities are saying that he doesn't have any prior record. Was he on law enforcement's agenda at all? Radar at all? Do you know about that aspect of the investigation?
Yeah, as of this hour, Kristen, there's no indication from anybody in law enforcement or any public records that we've been able to find that this individual had any prior contacts with law enforcement. That's a trend, by the way, that we have largely seen over the past 18 months. You're looking at the individual who fired shots at Donald Trump, Thomas Matthew Crooks in the Butler rally, Luigi Mangione, the person charged in the death of the United Healthcare CEO. Same with some of the other high-profile attacks that we've seen this year, including on those Minnesota lawmakers, the arson attack on Josh Shapiro, the individual who showed up in Washington, D.C., not all that far from you, to shoot and kill the two at the Israeli consulate or the Israeli event, and those were Israeli government employees. None of these people would have had any cause whatsoever to pop up on law enforcement's radar, and that is very much a discussion in law enforcement, the fact that this is happening seemingly at random individuals that are difficult to track.
And, of course, the big question looming over all of this, Tom, what is the motive? We know that the governor spoke to the fact that there were some things written on the weapon that was used. Do they have any sense of the motive at this point?
Right. So you're looking at some of the things that were referenced there. There's a number of kind of obscure meanings to this. The one that the governor referenced, I think, sticks out is the "Hey Fascist," presumably referring to the target of this assassination, who was Charlie Kirk. Catch, in other words, stop this bullet. There's some sayings here that have to do with individuals who were speaking out or listening to songs, the O Bella Ciao song against fascism. So there appears to be definitely a strong undercurrent of anti-fascism that is here, or at least that's the view that this individual is espousing. What some of the other phrases exactly mean, how that fits into all of this. There is a suspect that is in custody, obviously, in the form of Tyler Robinson. And so the question going forward is, will he say anything? And is there anything to find at his home, at his residence where he has roommates, as well as on those phones and devices? Could any of that be used to get us closer to a specific motive? I think the end result here is very clear. This individual, based on his statements to family members, was upset at Charlie Kirk, based on his statements to family members who become quite political recently. And so I think it's pretty clear, whatever it was definitely against Charlie Kirk, obviously. In this recent trend of his where he's appeared to pivot to some more extreme views is something investigators will closely track.
All right, Tom Winter, thank you for that reporting. Let me turn to Kelly O'Donnell now. Kelly, you heard Steve Patterson talking about the fact that he's definitely going to be facing state charges. Are you anticipating, could we see federal charges on top of these state charges?
It is possible, but from the sources I've been talking to, they have indicated they're not in a hurry. And by that, I mean they know that he is in custody. There is a process in Utah to detain him with charges coming in a couple of days. And so it allows federal investigators to take a wider look. I'm also told that they have not yet gotten access to his iCloud. Many of us can relate to all the things that can be housed in your digital footprint, in your digital garage. When you talked about the etchings, that's a very kind of old school way of making a message known, attaching it to the weapon. What you have in your cloud would really be lots of photos, lots of emails, lots of perhaps searches on the internet, a whole array of things. The roommate who was able to provide access to the one social media exchange was because it was his, presumably a male, his device that showed the conversation. That was important in this early phase. So imagine if they were able to get access to the iCloud where they would be able to see so much of the digital footprint. Now, from that, they might be able to discern some things that would fall into federal charges. It could be in the area of cyber stalking, perhaps. It could be in the area of doing work to try to get a sense of somehow crossing federal and state lines, those kinds of things that move it up. Typically, murder of a person who is not a federal office holder is a state offense, and so they'll look at weapons-related charges as well.
Well, one of the things that was so notable, Kelly, from one of the first press conferences, you had the governor saying that the death penalty is legal in Utah. You have President Trump saying that he would expect that they would seek the death penalty. Can you take us inside some of those conversations? Is that, in fact, what state officials are going to be and state prosecutors are going to be looking for here?
Well, there will be enormous political pressure for that, especially in a state where it is still employed, still the voters there, the citizens there support that. We've seen how death penalty has been changed over a generation or two with less of that. So that will be borne out by where they see the facts going and what a jury would ultimately decide if, in fact, again, this person has the presumption of innocence. It is my understanding, based on sources, that he has invoked his right to counsel and to not incriminate himself. And so there will be a process. Will it go to a full trial? Would there be a plea arrangement at some point, or whatever other steps coming? So many questions still. And certainly it's notable, Tom alluded to this, that when you have a family member who is involved, there have been other high-profile instances where family members have been involved. And when people say, how could a family member possibly help authorities? One of the things is fear of what could happen. If you are a fugitive on the run, there is great peril and danger in that, especially if you're ultimately apprehended. So arranging a surrender may, in fact, be a way to secure the safety of the family member that is loved by those around him.
Just an extraordinary turn of events this morning, Kelly. Before I let you go, authorities were asked, are they potentially searching for anyone else, or is this the only arrest? They indicated this is it. This is the person behind it.
At this point, they don't have any evidence of another individual involved in, certainly not seen on video, not seen at the location, nothing like that so far. Again, part of why access to emails and phones would be, were there others who were aware in advance and did not report, or other things that could contribute? We just don't know where that's going. But as it stands right now, they don't see any other individuals involved.
All right, Kelly O'Donnell, thanks for being here. Thanks for being on set. We appreciate it. Casey, let me turn to you now. I think people are baffled when they hear about a 22-year-old, no apparent criminal background that we know of right now. We know that this investigation is still unfolding. How does a person like this, Casey, become a suspected killer?
Well, in a nutshell, I'm not sure we were expecting him to be 22 and so vulnerable. We knew he had the age right. The description was correct. But I think we were expecting to see a little bit more evidence of him being a hardened extremist, when in fact, it looks like he's just a rudderless kid. I don't know if he has a job. Does he have a girlfriend? Other than going to tech school, we just know that he went to college for one semester and then left. What has been going on in his life in the last 4 years since he finished high school and became a presidential scholar in college? What's been going on? Has he just been a mass consumer of video games and videos and online vitriol? And I think that there's something a little bit pathetic about the writings on the gun and the bullets. I mean, they're immature, they're ridiculous. They're like something a little 13-year-old Beavis and Butthead would say. They did not really encompass, a carefully thought out thought process like we saw in the assassination of the United Healthcare CEO. It more likened itself to just kind of the angst that we saw with the shooter in the Minneapolis Catholic school just a few weeks ago. So he's a mashup. And trust me, he's been following all of these incidents online, and he has been inspired by them. I don't know that he's become so political in recent months or years, so much as he's become politicized. And he's never voted. He's unaffiliated. He's just a kid without direction. And we know that vacant minds are fertile ground for poisoning with online vitriol. And I really think that's what we're going to discover with him. It does not excuse it, but it might explain it.
Casey, what you're describing is almost more terrifying than someone who has been radicalized. You are describing someone who does not feel as though they have a fulfilled life, someone who gets sucked into the content online and then is capable of pulling off this horrific act which claimed the life of a 31-year-old father of two. You heard Governor Cox today say part of the solution is for people to get off of line, to turn away from some of that violent rhetoric and hateful rhetoric that lives there. Talk a little bit about how strong that pull can be towards what people are reading and seeing online.
I can talk academically, but also from firsthand experience, having taught college kids of this age for the last 35 years. And I have never seen a more alarming group of kids in their 20s. Post-COVID particularly, the isolation of that really drove them to the internet, and they became mass consumers. I mean, they give you the 1,000-yard stare when you ask them a question. They refuse to answer. They are all in a little bit of a rabbit hole in their minds because of the disconnect with society. And the answer truly is to close your phone, turn your phone off and turn your computer off and go for a walk. But the appeal of it, and don't forget, so much of this vitriol is bots. It is absolutely artificial, and it is meant to draw people in. Young minds are just fertile ground for poison. And I think that parents need to step up and really do some interventions. And I don't want you to think I feel sorry for this young man, but I wouldn't be surprised if the governor, at least, walks back his declaration that they would be seeking the death penalty before they even knew who the culprit was. That was a little premature, because usually that is reserved for some very serious aggravating circumstances. And we may find some mitigating circumstances in this that would make him perhaps invoke Charlie Kirk's concept of forgiveness, not that we will let this guy off the hook if he is indeed convicted, but that there needs to be a little bit more understanding of all of the complex variables that led him to lay on that roof and fire that gun with a shot to the neck that was meant to silence. I mean, he could have aimed at the chest or the head, but it was symbolic. He wanted to silence Charlie Kirk. And when we silence free speech, all of us are lost.
An attack against our entire democracy, that is for sure. Casey Jordan, thank you so much for your incredible insights. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.